Hey guys, this is Rosita, your go-to vocal and language coach here on TakeLessons.com, and welcome to another episode of my Beginning Spanish Phonation series. So this is the place where you guys are going to learn how the Spanish language is correctly pronounced. I'm going to walk you through the basics of Spanish pronunciation, pronunciación, intonation, entonación, inflection, inflexión, and spelling, ortografía. So you guys can start the learning process a bit more with confidence. Learning the way of how Spanish language sounds will make the rest of the learning process a lot easier, believe me. So, if you guys have been following my videos, we studied el abecedario, the Spanish alphabet. We learned that the letter name doesn't always represent the sound, the phonation, and also we learned that a letter can actually have two different sounds depending on its vowel. In another video, we actually learned about Spanish vowels. A, E, I, O, U. We learned how there are open and closed ones. We learned how there are stressed and unstressed. Then we got into diphthongs, or tongos, in another video, how there are rising diphthongs and falling diphthongs. We're going to move on. We're going to look at the accentuation, la acentuación. So this time we're going to study what the stress should fall on words in Spanish. Also, we're going to look at some common mistakes made by beginning students when they are starting to learn Spanish and how to pronunciate. And then we're going to finish by doing some practice so that you guys can apply what we covered in this lesson to your practice. So to start off today, I'm going to talk about the 4 different categories of las palabras polisílabas, the polysyllabic words. Now, just to mention what a polysyllabic word is, just basically it's simple, a word that has multiple syllables. These categories, vamos a tener las palabras agudas, palabras llanas, palabras esdrújulas, y palabras sobredrújulas. I know these are not everyday words, so I'm going to do the best I can to put it in English terms. Una palabra aguda is a word that has a prosodic accent in the last syllable. If you guys studied linguistics, the technical term for this would be an oxytone. What I'm just trying to say is that by this, that the accent falls on the last syllable of the word. And also, please do not confuse a prosodic accent with an emphatic or graphic accent. Prosodic accents don't necessarily require a graphic accent. Here we have the word café, and as we can see, it has 2 syllables, which are café. We can also see that the stress falls on the second syllable, café. Important to remember that una palabra aguda can have more than 2 syllables as long as the last one is the one that's accented. Another example is con la palabra corazón. Corazón, we see here that there are 3 syllables, which are corazón. Again, the stress falls on that last syllable, and because of this, we call it una palabra aguda. Alright, so now let's move on to las palabras llanas. They are sometimes called palabras graves, but for our purposes, we're just going to use llanas. So, una palabra llana is simply a word that has a prosodic accent on the second to the last syllable. Okay, that doesn't sound too hard, right? So again, I just want to make sure that we're going to be on the same page here, because we're talking about prosodic accents, which are stresses and the prosody rhythm, but not emphatic or graphic accents, which requires writing an accent mark above the vowel. Now we're going to look at some common mistakes related to the accentation in the Spanish language. So what would you say as one of the most common mistakes made by students who are just starting to learn accentuation? Besides figuring out what in the world accentation is. So it's actually really common for students to confuse the prosodic accent. Students often accent a syllable that shouldn't receive a prosodic accent, and that's what happens when this accent is confused with las palabras agudas con las palabras llanas. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, it does become a little bit more difficult to pronounce. So when the prosodic accents are correctly placed, the words are easier to pronounce. And in terms of being understood, if this accent is mistaken, we probably could still understand. But on the other hand, you might get some confusion. You might get some confused faces. So, okay, so let's do some practice. So we're gonna look at frijol, which is bean. So we can see it has two syllables. So the prosodic accent is on, which is the last, frijol. Now, the next palabra aguda is cantar. Cantar means to sing, which you guys know me, I love to do. I'm a vocal coach. So again, this has two syllables, and accordingly the prosodic accent is going to be on the second, which, just like frijol, is the last. Cantar. Next tenemos soportar. Soportar it has three syllables. So the prosodic accent is going to be on the third, again, which is going to be the last. Soportar. Now let's check out maraton. Three syllables. So the accent is going to be on the third. Maraton. Now the last one we're going to check out is estacionar. This one has four syllables. So the prosodic accent is going to be on the fourth, which is going to be the last one. Estacionar. Okay, now let's check out las palabras llanas. Here, we're going to have the prosodic accent on the second to the last syllable. So let's check out árbol, which means tree. This one has two syllables, so the prosodic accent is going to be on the first, which is in this case the second to the last. Árbol. Next, tenemos hueso. This has two syllables, and just like what we saw in the last example, the prosodic accent is going to be on the first. Next, tenemos campana. Campana, here we have three syllables. So the prosodic accent is going to be on the second to the last, so it'll be on that pa. Campana. Next, accidente. This time there are four syllables, so then it's going to have the prosodic accent. Accidente. Next, filosofía. Here we have five syllables, so again, look at the second to the last. So, fi is going to have the prosodic accent. Alright, so you can see it was not as hard as it was seeming to be. And we're talking about these words that describe the different syllables that seems like it's going to be really difficult. Well, it's actually not. We learned las palabras agudas or oxytones, which have a prosodic accent in the final syllable, as in frijol, where we can see that the accent falls on the last syllable here. And please, I know I keep repeating myself, but please do not confuse a prosodic accent with an emphatic or graphic accent. Prosodic accents don't necessarily require a graphic accent. Palabras llanas, or the paroxytones, and these are words that have an accent on the second to the last syllable, as an accidente, then having the accent. We're going to look at the third and fourth category. Start with las palabras esdrújulas. Una palabra esdrújula is basically the word is going to have the accent on the third to the last syllable. Now, in linguistics, the technical term for this is proparoxytone. But don't let this big word scare you. My accent definitely showed when saying that. It just basically, it means that the third to the last syllable is going to receive an accent. The reason I used it is, again, is for students who are familiar with linguistics. Also, for all esdrújula y también los sobreesdrújula words, the syllable that receives the prosodic accent also receives a graphic accent. Por ejemplo, murciélago. So murciélago, we see that it has 4 syllables, and it's the second one which is going to have the accent. Another example, miércoles. Miércoles, meaning Wednesday, has 3 syllables. In this case, the first syllable is going to have the accent. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the last category in our studies of accentuation. These are going to be las palabras sobresdrújulas. Now, these have a prosodic accent before the third to the last. It could be the fourth to the last syllable or another syllable before that. Por ejemplo, COM-PRA-SE-LO. COM-PRA-SE-LO means buy it. So in this case, we see that the word has 4 syllables, and it's the first one which is going to have the accent. Another example, so I'm going to talk about the common mistakes related to the accents in Spanish here. We talked the last time how it was common for students whom are new to Spanish to accentuate the syllable that normally doesn't receive it. We also said that even when this mistake is made, the word is often understandable, but still you might get some confused faces. Today we're going to look at las palabras esdrújulas y sobresdrújulas, which necessarily have at least 3 or 4 syllables. So I imagine that it's even more challenging to get the pronunciation right with these. The more syllables that a word has, the harder it is going to be pronounced. So another common mistake is to apply the pronunciation of one language in words in Spanish. It is really hard to avoid. It's a strange thing because even if you're completely fluent in Spanish, or any language in that matter, you spend a lot of time in a place where they speak English or some other language, so some of that pronunciation will undoubtedly find its way into your Spanish, and it's really difficult. So, okay, por ejemplo, abundante, which means abundant. Now, in Spanish, if we break it down syllable by syllable, we get abundante. And we see that this is a palabra llana because the prosodic accent is on the second to the last syllable. Abundante. Now in English, abundant is only 3. And it's still pues una palabra llana because the prosodic accent also falls on the second to the last syllable. But now the syllable in English is different from the syllable in Spanish. So for a native English speaker, it is easy to make the mistake abundante as abundante, because in English we say abundant. And conversely, for native Spanish speakers, it goes vice versa. The word accent. We have accent and accent. So, and in Spanish we say acento, ¿verdad? But in English we say accent. So you can see where the stress is going to fall on a different syllable because the words are so similar. And it's really easy to confuse, but it can be funny, I'm not gonna lie. So it's really hard to avoid. It's really unavoidable. So when you're speaking a couple languages, trust me, I speak 3. Okay, let's do a couple of examples here. We're going to look at some prosodic accents that falls on the first, which is the third to last. So okay, so let's start. So let's do some examples. Let's move on. Let's start out with las palabras esdrújulas, como énfasis. So this word has 3 syllables. The prosodic accent falls on the first, which is technically the third to the last. Énfasis, which is emphasis. Lógico. Aquí tenemos 3 syllables. So again, the prosodic accent is going to be on the first, which is the third to the last. The last one we're going to look is parasítico. which is 5 syllables, so the prosodic accent is going to fall on the 3rd syllable. Vamos a practicar las palabras sobredrújulas, como pasándomela, pass it on here. It's going to be English equivalent. This word has 5 syllables and the prosodic accent falls on the 2nd syllable, which is the 4th to the last. Then diciéndomelo, which means to tell me or telling me. The accent is going to fall on the 2nd syllable, which is the 4th to the last. I'm sure you're getting the gist of this. Well, this wraps up for that full lesson. Please be sure to check out the rest of my videos if you haven't done so already. And please subscribe. There are 2 more lessons to complete this series. If you guys have any questions, if you guys are watching this here on YouTube, leave your questions down below in the comment section. If you guys are watching this on takelessons.com, go ahead, click that button that says ask a question. I'll be more than happy to help you. Alright guys, and tell me what you think. Tell me if these videos have been helping you guys. I really want to know. I want to make sure that I provide the best for you guys. Alright, pues ojalá que nos hablamos pronto. Hopefully we'll speak very soon. And nos vemos pronto. Ciao.